Every single morning, millions of people wake up and do the same thing. They follow the same routine they have followed for years, sometimes decades. They consider it healthy. Some of them consider it essential. A few of them have been doing it so long that skipping it feels wrong, like something would be missing from the day if they changed it. And here is the thing that makes this so quietly dangerous. Most of these people are not doing something obviously harmful. They are not eating fast food for breakfast or skipping sleep or living recklessly. They are doing something that looks, on the surface, like the responsible, health-conscious choice. But underneath that surface, in the specific biochemistry of blood sugar regulation and insulin response, what they are doing every morning is setting up a metabolic cascade that builds over months and years into one of the most common and most destructive health trajectories in the modern world. Blood sugar dysregulation does not announce itself loudly. It does not arrive with a dramatic event or a sudden crisis. It arrives the way most chronic damage does, incrementally, through the accumulation of small repeated inputs that each seem harmless alone, but compound into something significant over time. And the morning is where the most powerful of those inputs lives, because of something very specific about how blood sugar behaves in the first hours after waking. Something that the habit most people have is directly, physiologically working against. Stay with me, because what you are about to understand about your own morning may change the most important daily choice you make. And if this kind of specific biology-first conversation about your health is what you have been searching for, hit like and subscribe right now. Dr. Victor Lang built this channel for one reason, and it is this: to give you the real mechanisms behind what is happening in your body, so you can make genuinely informed decisions rather than following generalized advice that was never tailored to your specific situation. Let us start at the beginning, because the beginning of this story is the foundation of everything else. When you wake up in the morning, your body has been in a fasting state for 7, 8, sometimes 9 hours. No food has come in. Blood glucose has been kept stable overnight by the liver releasing stored glycogen into the bloodstream in carefully regulated pulses. And in the final hours before waking, something specific and significant happens. Your body begins preparing for the demands of the day by releasing a surge of hormones that are designed to raise blood sugar. Cortisol, the primary stress and alertness hormone, rises steeply in the early morning hours. Growth hormone pulses overnight. Glucagon signals the liver to push more glucose into the blood. This morning hormonal surge, called the dawn phenomenon, is a natural and necessary biological event. It is your body filling the tank before the engine starts running. The problem is that in people who are developing insulin resistance, which now affects an estimated 1 in 3 American adults, and which rises dramatically in prevalence after 40, the dawn phenomenon does not just fill the tank to normal levels, it overfills it. Cortisol drives blood sugar higher than it needs to go. The insulin response that should bring it back down is blunted by insulin resistance. And the result is that many people begin the day already in a mildly elevated blood sugar state before they have eaten a single bite of food. Their fasting blood glucose, measured first thing in the morning before breakfast, is higher than it should be and has been creeping upward for years without crossing the clinical threshold that would trigger a diabetes diagnosis. Now add the morning habit, and this is where the specific culprit enters the story, and where most people feel the shock of recognition. The habit that silently drives blood sugar higher every single morning in people who are already waking with an elevated dawn phenomenon is drinking coffee on an empty stomach. Not coffee in general, not coffee with a balanced meal. Coffee specifically consumed within the first hour of waking before any food has been eaten, in a body that is already hormonally primed toward elevated blood glucose. Here is the precise mechanism, because the mechanism is what makes this undeniable. Caffeine stimulates the adrenal glands to release additional cortisol. In a body that has already been in a cortisol surge since 4 or 5 in the morning, adding caffeine-driven cortisol on top of the dawn phenomenon, cortisol creates a compounding hormonal spike. This combined cortisol surge signals the liver to release even more glucose into the bloodstream through a process called gluconeogenesis. Simultaneously, caffeine directly interferes with insulin sensitivity at the cellular level by blocking adenosine receptors that play a role in glucose uptake signaling. The result, documented in multiple controlled studies on caffeine and glucose metabolism, is that fasting blood sugar rises measurably after morning coffee consumption compared to days when coffee is delayed or skipped. In people with healthy insulin sensitivity, the body compensates. In people with any degree of insulin resistance, which describes a significant percentage of adults over 45. The compensation is incomplete. Blood sugar rises higher and stays elevated longer after morning coffee than it does in metabolically healthy individuals. Now multiply this by every morning for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Each morning, the cortisol spike is a little higher than it needs to be. Each morning, the insulin response falls a little shorter. Each morning, blood sugar spends a little more time in that elevated range that damages blood vessel walls, feeds chronic inflammation, and gradually overwhelms the pancreatic beta cells that produce insulin. The progression from normal blood sugar to prediabetes to type 2 diabetes is not a sudden transition. It is the statistical result of repeated daily inputs, morning after morning, year after year, each one small enough to be invisible in isolation, each one adding to the same cumulative direction. And here is what makes this so emotionally complicated when people first hear it. Coffee is not inherently bad for metabolic health. The research on coffee and long-term diabetes risk is actually favorable for people who drink it with meals or later in the morning after eating. The protective polyphenols in coffee have genuine documented benefits for insulin sensitivity when they are not competing with an empty stomach cortisol amplifying context. The problem is not the coffee. The problem is the timing and the specific combination of an already elevated dawn phenomenon cortisol state, an empty stomach, and the immediate addition of caffeine creates a morning blood sugar environment that is categorically different from what coffee does when consumed under different conditions. The second morning habit that compounds this problem is something that sounds remarkably healthy and has been recommended widely for decades. Fruit juice, particularly orange juice, consumed in the morning as part of what most people still think of as a nutritious breakfast. Whole fruit, with its fiber intact, slows the absorption of its natural sugars meaningfully. The fiber creates a physical barrier that delays glucose from reaching the bloodstream rapidly, blunting the blood sugar spike that the fruit's sugar content would otherwise cause. But juice is fruit with its fiber removed. What remains is a concentrated solution of fructose and glucose that enters the digestive system with almost no physical barrier to rapid absorption. A glass of orange juice in the morning can raise blood sugar faster than many candy bars, not because it contains more sugar overall, but because it contains sugar in a form that the body absorbs at a speed the insulin response cannot comfortably keep pace with. The spike is rapid. The insulin surge that follows is reactive and overshooting. And in people who are already managing the elevated morning cortisol we just described, the combination of black coffee on an empty stomach followed by a glass of orange juice creates a blood sugar environment in the first 30 minutes of the day that sends metabolic signals of significant stress throughout every cell in the body. What follows that spike matters as much as the spike itself. When blood sugar rises rapidly and then insulin overshoots to compensate, blood sugar drops, often below a comfortable baseline. This reactive low, which arrives 90 minutes to 2 hours after the initial spike, is what most people experience as the mid-morning energy crash, the sudden hunger that arrives before noon, the difficulty concentrating around 10 or 11, the reaching for something sweet or caffeinated to pull themselves back up. This blood sugar roller coaster, ride after ride, morning after morning, is one of the primary physiological drivers of energy instability, brain fog, mood fluctuation, increased appetite, and cravings throughout the day. And it is being initiated every morning by the specific combination of habits that hundreds of millions of people believe are setting them up well for the day. Now let us talk about the third morning habit in this pattern, because this one carries the most emotional weight of all, and it is the one most likely to produce resistance when people hear it: skipping breakfast entirely. The intermittent fasting trend of the past decade has popularized extended morning fasting, and there are legitimate metabolic benefits associated with fasting protocols that are well supported in the research. The problem is that extended morning fasting combined with black coffee in the dawn phenomenon window creates a specific situation that is particularly dangerous for people with already elevated fasting glucose. When no food arrives after the cortisol and caffeine-driven blood sugar elevation of early morning, the liver continues releasing glucose. Cortisol remains elevated because the absence of food signals the body that resources are scarce and stress hormones need to stay high. The elevated blood sugar that would ordinarily come down after a balanced breakfast remains elevated for hours, during which time it is doing the quiet cellular damage that accumulates into the vascular complications and insulin resistance that define the progression of metabolic disease. This does not mean intermittent fasting is wrong for everyone. It means that the specific pattern of black coffee immediately upon waking, followed by an extended fast, is the highest risk morning configuration for people who already have elevated fasting glucose, any degree of insulin resistance, or a family history of type 2 diabetes. The research on this specific combination consistently shows worse glucose outcomes than either morning eating or delayed coffee with food, and yet it is the pattern that health culture has normalized almost without qualification. So what does a morning that actually protects blood sugar look like? It starts with understanding that the first 30 minutes after waking are not the time to spike cortisol further. Hydrating with water first, before any caffeine, gives the body fluid it genuinely needs after an overnight fast and does not add to the cortisol burden. Delaying coffee by 45 minutes to an hour after waking, allowing the natural dawn phenomenon cortisol to begin its descent before adding caffeine to the system, has been shown in research on cortisol timing to meaningfully reduce the compounding cortisol spike. Having something with protein and healthy fat before or alongside coffee, even something modest like eggs, a handful of nuts, or a small serving of Greek yogurt, provides a nutritional context that slows gastric emptying, blunts the caffeine-driven cortisol response, and gives the insulin system something manageable to work with rather than an empty stomach hormonal storm. The specific protein and fat-first breakfast strategy is supported by compelling research on what is called the second meal effect. When the first meal of the day is anchored in protein and fat rather than simple carbohydrates, it establishes an insulin sensitivity context that reduces blood sugar spikes not just at breakfast, but at every subsequent meal throughout the day. The glycemic outcome of your lunch is measurably influenced by what you ate at breakfast, and the glycemic outcome of your breakfast is measurably influenced by whether you ate something with protein and fat before your first glucose load of the day. Starting the day with a blood sugar stable first meal is not just about that meal. It is about resetting the entire metabolic arc of the day from the very first input. Replacing fruit juice entirely is one of the most impactful single changes a person can make to their morning blood sugar profile. Eating a whole orange rather than drinking its juice delivers the same vitamins alongside the fiber that transforms a blood sugar spike into a gradual, manageable glucose rise. Replacing flavored yogurts, granola, cereals, and sweetened oatmeal, all of which have significantly higher glycemic loads than their health reputations suggest, with eggs, avocado, cheese, nuts, or unsweetened full-fat dairy, gives the body a metabolic foundation in the morning that serves blood sugar stability for hours. And then there is the habit that costs nothing and changes everything in the morning blood sugar picture: walking, not an intense workout, not a gym session, not anything that requires planning or equipment. A 10 to 15-minute walk within an hour of eating breakfast uses the glucose that the morning's hormonal environment produced, engages the muscle insulin receptors that are most sensitive to movement immediately after eating, and has been documented in multiple clinical studies to reduce post-meal blood sugar spikes more effectively than most pharmaceutical interventions per unit of benefit. Skeletal muscle is the largest glucose disposal organ in the human body. Activating it with even a short walk immediately after breakfast redirects the blood glucose that morning cortisol mobilized from the vessels where it causes damage to the muscles where it is meant to be used. The larger story underneath all of these specific morning habits is one about accumulated direction. Your metabolism is not a fixed state. It is a dynamic system that responds continuously to inputs, and the morning inputs are disproportionately powerful because they establish the hormonal and biochemical context for every hour that follows. A morning that begins with hydration, a modest delay before caffeine, a protein-anchored first meal, and a short walk after eating does not just produce a better blood sugar profile on that specific morning. It trains the system. It preserves insulin sensitivity. It reduces the cortisol burden on a pancreas that is already working harder after 40 than it did before. It changes the direction of the accumulation. The progression toward blood sugar dysregulation, toward prediabetes, toward type 2 diabetes, is not inevitable. It is the statistical result of daily patterns that, individually, feel entirely harmless. And the reversal of that progression, or the prevention of it in people whose numbers are not yet alarming, but are trending in a dangerous direction, is also the statistical result of daily patterns. Different ones, better calibrated ones, ones that work with the morning biology rather than against it. You now understand something about your own mornings that most people who are managing this condition were never told before it became a diagnosis. The habit driving this was hiding in plain sight. not because it was obscure, but because nobody had explained the specific mechanism clearly enough for the warning to land with the weight it deserved. Let me know in the comments what your morning routine looks like right now, and which part of this changed the way you think about it. Your experience is valuable to everyone else who is reading those comments and trying to figure out where they stand. And if someone in your life is doing the exact morning routine we described, coffee immediately on an empty stomach, juice, extended fast, and wondering why their blood sugar numbers keep creeping in the wrong direction, please share this video with them. Because this specific combination of information and mechanism is exactly what turns confusion into clarity, and clarity into the kind of change that actually moves the numbers. Your body tells you what it needs through the trajectory of your health. The morning habit it has been asking you to change has been speaking clearly all along. Now you finally know what it has been saying.